Everybody thinks that in order to start a great business, it has to be revolutionary or world-changing, but it just has to be innovative, meaning it just has to solve a problem in a better way. Today, we're talking about Craigslist and how Craig Newmark built the world's simplest, most effective classified ads website that literally does billions of dollars. It's still privately held today, and we're going to jump right in. Bootstrapped, lace them up. Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of Bootstrap on the Pain of Profits podcast for entrepreneurs. And today we're talking about a website that kind of makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable when I use it. I haven't used it in a long time, but that company and that website is Craigslist. And if you don't know this story, you're probably going to be kind of blown away. But I think to kick it off and set the framework up, Our Future, who was recently purchased this year by The Morning Brew, put together a great short that kind of tees up the entire story for Craigslist, and then we're going to talk about it. So without further ado, hit that, C-Rock.
This guy makes hundreds of millions from a website he hasn't touched in 20 years. Craig Newmark worked at IBM for nearly 20 years before a move to San Francisco got him hooked on internet startups. He started an email newsletter to keep friends in the know about local events. But little did Craig know it would evolve into so much more. The list grew like wildfire, and requests poured in to feature everything from apartment listings to items for sale. Despite millions of site visitors, Craig decided not to put ads on the website or invest in flashy marketing or design. He charged people a small fee to post their listing, and by the mid-2000s, Craigslist was operating in 50 countries, sucking in 20 billion page views a month. By 2017, Craigslist was valued at over $5 billion, and even today, its traffic often outranks websites like Netflix. While countless competitors like Facebook Marketplace, Etsy, and Indeed have chipped away at Craigslist market share in recent years, the site still generated over $700 million in revenue last year, and it only has 50 employees. It still looks like a 1990s website, which has defied the tech industry's constant quest for innovation. Maybe some things are better left unchanged.
And or maybe some things are impossible to change. They got something like 20 million pages on that website. Yeah. And I think they still get about 250 million visitors.
It's insane.
A day or a month to the site. That's a lot. And is guys who come from that world of marketing and websites, it's not very easy to just rip and replace that. The biggest thing being is SEO value. I mean, every time you change one of those URLs, you run the risk of creating a 404 error, and that potentially could destroy the SEO value, which is ultimately what helps them dominate.
Right.
Though it might feel a little dated here for the United States, the rest of the world is still using that because it's still prominent in like 70 countries.
70 countries.
And so
600 cities around the world.
Yeah. It has 700 local websites under its belt, 70 different countries. This article says they get 190 million visitors from the US, 45 million from Guam, 7.7 million from Canada, 1.7 million from China, and 705,000 from the UK. So they're still doing it up.
Yeah, they're doing it up. What did you learn about the life of Craig Newmark?
Well, clearly the dude, so we always talk about in entrepreneurship, right? You either are born into a family business, you spend 7 to 10 years working in an industry, go beat your head against the wall, or you find a mentor, some combination of the both. So he spent 20 years working for IBM, which I think is probably the most important. And most people who are listening to this pod, you know, the vast majority of people who start companies in this country are between the ages of 30 and 40 years old. So Craig, with 20 years under his belt, he probably started when he was 20. So he was
43 when he started.
And it's 43 when he started the company. So that's kind of like the first little nugget is you got time. Hang in there, right? Most of your great ideas aren't going to come until you have enough like experience to try to go solve a problem. The second thing that I thought was interesting was how it started out was him very simply just building an email list and keeping people in the know.
Right.
It kind of reminds me of how The Hustle got started. Right. The Hustle newsletter was really just him keeping people up to date with what was happening in the world of technology.
Right.
And then that turned into, hey, let's have an event called HustleCon, which then turned into, I got this list of like 20,000 people. I could probably monetize it. So I thought that was interesting too. I think that a lot of times we overcomplicate it instead of just getting started on the path and having some patience for how we're going to go and grow the business. It doesn't have to be tomorrow, but it could be 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. I think that was a big component to his success, is he was it was a bit of a side hustle. So he wasn't obsessed or didn't have a gun to his head to make it successful today.
Correct. I think one of the things to note is oftentimes these billion-dollar ideas come from simple perspectives. So he was laid off or took a severance package. He was at Charles Schwab, and he took a severance package, had a good chunk of change, and was like, I want to do something to give back to people in my community, in my circle. Boom. Fast forward 30 years later, it's just, I think it's interesting how, in our media-driven age, you're like, where's the innovation? Where's the next idea? And it's like, sometimes it's just right in front of your face, man, of just go do something for somebody else.
Yeah. I mean, and the real problem that he fixed, which most people don't realize, is he just solved newspaper classified ads and put them on the internet.
Yeah.
At scale globally. I mean, most people watching this, I can't even remember last time I looked at a newspaper. They sometimes land up on my front door and I generally throw them in the trash. But at once upon a time, that was the place. The classified ads was the place. I mean, you remember the penny saver?
I remember the classified ads.
Classifieds and the penny saver. So essentially, that was it. So innovation doesn't necessarily mean revolutionary, world changing, as much as it means modernizing something that hasn't quite made the full shift into the next era.
Yeah, I would one-liner and say solve a problem in a better way. I think one of the things to note about that point with the impact on newspaper, in the 10 years from the time where Craigslist started, newspaper revenue plummeted. The revenue in the newspaper space plummeted 77%.
Yeah, and so a couple of weeks ago we were talking about Bill Gross on the Street Smarts pod.
Yeah.
And Bill Gross said that the number one determining factor for startup success is timing. So his timing might have been just right because it was, what was it, 90 something?
95.
95 when he started. So the internet was like 12 years old at that point when he started. So it was still in its infancy, but he could see, being that he was working at IBM for as long as he was, where the internet was going. So he had a bit of a competitive edge, more first principles outlook on where things were going, not how they were, but how they were going to be. And so that's definitely a key to being successful when trying to bootstrap your business. Is you got to have vision. You got to be playing offense. You got to be innovating regularly. That's never going to go away. You're constantly going to be changing and adapting because the market is always changing and adapting. In fact, the only competitor in the market is the market. It's not the other guy trying to do what you're doing.
That's good. What else did you one of the things I noticed in researching so today they're this $3 billion valuation company.
They were as high as $5 billion in 2017, but 2020 they were doing 2017, 2018 they did $1 billion a year, and then the very next year, 2020, they did $500 million. So their value's down, but it's still, for a website that's privately held.
It's privately held, and one of the things, and we'll touch on this as when we get to our core points around the business, they only have 50 employees.
Yeah.
50 employees.
It's incredible.
Covering 700 countries. Not 700 countries.
70
countries.
70 countries, 600 cities, yeah.
700 countries. Where all these countries come from? There ain't that many countries in the world. And that's a really incredible thing, being that scale of operating, that amount of bandwidth to be containing, operating with 50 people.
Yeah, it's incredible. The parts that I don't like about Craigslist, I think are important to note. There's definitely like a dark side of Craigslist.
Yes.
And, whose responsibility is that to police that? And because they haven't really like improved their security protocols on there, it's, I would say it's like sometimes one step away from the dark web. I'm not even.
Have you heard of the website Craigslist Killings?
No.
So they have a dedicated website to
Holy crap.
and it logs every killing that has happened as a result of a Craigslist correspondence.
Like when to go, whatever.
Yeah.
Buy a car or something.
So the latest one happened in 2021. Says woman gets 40 years for killing man during Craigslist car sale. But to date, 132 people have been murdered as a result of using Craigslist.
I mean, yeah, I mean, that's just going to happen as a byproduct of the internet in general. I don't know if that's Craig's fault in general.
It's definitely not necessarily Craig's fault, but the space, the way it operates, which is one of the great principles, but also is leveraged on the dark side of things, is anonymity.
Yeah.
They built this platform. As they continue to build, they did emphasize anonymity to try to, circumvent things like discrimination, classism, when it came to like jobs and other forms of profiling. But that also works, it's same thing why people criticize Bitcoin, blockchain, and say this is being used because you don't know who's using it. So they have a whole website that tracks these things. Interestingly enough, the Senate actually Congress passed a bill. So there was a part of the website called personals.
Mm-hmm.
There was like personal ads.
Yep.
It wasn't related to business. And it disappeared in 2018. And people were like, why did it just go away? Well, Congress passed a bill, without going into details on the bill, HR 1865, which is the Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act. But it was basically the law went into law that the government can now hold websites responsible for these types of things happening. So Craig could be held responsible.
He could be held responsible. That's good.
Yeah. And so he did that real quick.
Which is funny that, I mean, obviously in that case, like that's a great reason for that. There's also another bill, I can't remember what it's called, but it's the one that Yelp used to basically effectively say that they can't be held responsible for anything that anybody else says about your business online. So, we've all heard the horror stories about Yelp. Now they hold you captive.
Yeah.
And Yelp would be like, well, we don't really control what people say and we can't be held responsible. I think, if you're the owner of the business and you're making money, right? It's just like if you had a local massage parlor and people were, selling sex out of it, like who would be responsible for that?
I didn't do it. I wasn't involved.
Exactly. So it's always interesting to see those dichotomies between that. But the other thing that I think was interesting about Craig was, after he ran the company for basically 5 years, he actually stepped down as the CEO, which I'm not sure most people who start a company would have the wherewithal to do that. But I think for him, he was actually more focused on the nonprofit side of, he's one of the largest philanthropists in America. People don't realize that about him.
I didn't realize that.
So once he started making enough money, he kind of achieved the ultimate freedom of entrepreneurship, which is freedom of purpose, right? So first freedom is freedom of time. Then you got freedom of money. Then you get freedom of relationship, and you got freedom of purpose. So he's held on to the business forever. Now there's enough money coming in perpetuity. He doesn't even have to run it. And he just gets to go around doing work that makes more impact. And so we talk a lot about making more money to make more impact, not necessarily to buy cool toys. Those are fun. Yeah. But, are you building a business that gives you, that becomes a self-managing company that you can own in perpetuity, that creates enough income for you, your family, your legacy, and allows you to make a lot of impact.
So did you know that eBay bought part of Craigslist?
I did not know that.
So eBay bought 30% of the company.
Wow.
In 2004. Check this out. So they bought 30% of the company, and then they had the bright idea that they were going to copy Craigslist.
That seems against the bylaws in some way, shape, or form.
And so they spent the next 7 years in legal battles, culminating in 2011 with eBay selling it back to them. I'm presumably at a discounted price. So I thought that was neat, interesting that, got to sell, acquired it back, got the asset back, those shares back. And so, but they bought it and tried to copy the company.
That's wild. So what I want to break down are just kind of the 7 things that I gathered. Obviously we talked about those interesting things, but 7 things that I think Craig and his list did really, really well that made them successful. So the very first thing was just, they started simple. Right. So they started out with just an email list. And I think a lot of you who want to be entrepreneurs or are entrepreneurs are just going way too big too soon. The idea can be very simple. It can be 1 or 2 clients, 1 or 2 offerings, 1 or 2 packages. You just got to get your couple first customers. And for him, it was just an email list. The second thing is playing the long game. We talk about this a lot on the pod, but people who bootstrap, MailChimp, 20 years, Spanx, 20 years, they all kind of have that 20-year mark. Canva, I think, was 12 or 15 before they got to
Takes time.
billion. So Craig knew primarily the list grew primarily through word of mouth, and they focused on building a product or service that people naturally wanted to share.
Yeah.
And I think that component of the virality of what they were creating was pretty vital.
Dude, to your point on that, he said, he has a quote where he says, I thought this was a powerful quote that illustrates that point. He says, just give the community the information and be done with it. People don't want the fancy stuff. They just want to get it and get on with their lives.
Which is how classifieds work, right? So which is counterintuitive to everything we now know about technology and user experience and yada, yada, yada. So I think that matters to a certain extent. It just depends on what you're looking for. I think, you got Facebook, Indeed, Etsy. They all tried to kind of niche out and still part of Craigslist share. You could even say that Tinder, right? Remember there was the old Lost Love classifieds that would be on there?
I don't remember him too personally just because I never engaged with it, but I do remember hearing by word of mouth.
There you go. So that led to them building 1,000 raving fans, right? They just focused on, if I can get these core people using the platform, I have a very profitable company. I don't need millions and billions of users. I just need 1,000 true fans. And that goes to what we call the law of diffusion of innovation. So when you're bootstrapping or building any company, most people try to go to the jump in the deep end instead of going to find the 13.5% of the population that shares the same values that they do. The people that are perfectly comfortable making decisions based off of what they believe. And so we always say your vibe attracts your tribe. And so they really hammered on that. And they got those raving fans who then naturally shared the good news with everybody else.
Dude, that's really powerful. Like, not to segue, to side note that, but I'm sitting here listening to that and it's 13%. Everyone thinks 100%, millions. It's like, we're the 13% of people who think the way I think, who I can deeply connect with and solve problems and help and serve them.
And that's why, they talk about other sayings that would allude to that, niches and riches in the niches, right? Identify your avatar, go narrow.
The next person that comes around with people bring us consulting issues, I'm going to say, who's your 13%?
Yeah, exactly. It's true. It's really true. So because they were focused on just identifying their tribe and niching down, playing the long game, they really emphasized lean operations because they were pretty frugal in the way that they were growing. The next piece, number 5, is just consistency and reliability. So customer experience definitely mattered a lot to them. And I think when we're hustling to get revenue, sometimes the things we can do is just focus on like closing the deal and then on to the next one.
Right.
But slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So sometimes getting the revenue, doing an excellent job, and you could take on more. Like we could take on more business right now, but we're really focused on the clients that we do have, the customers that we do serve, without getting too far in front of our skis, to refine our processes and our systems and build our team and reinvest capital to grow horizontally versus trying to grow vertically. Because at a certain point, going vertical, it breaks if you don't have enough bandwidth.
That's good.
And then monetization strategy. So they were very clear that, like you said, give the people what they want and everything else will kind of fall into place. So money is a result of a great service or product, right? So they used an excellent experience as the kind of the core anchor for everything they were doing. So it's kind of like if you go to a restaurant and the food is not that great, but the service is like amazing, it carries a lot of weight. Like you will let the fact that the food wasn't great and you probably feel like you paid too much go because the service was awesome. That's the same kind of concept.
Thinking about that, I was considering some things and I found something about Craig Newmark. this excellence piece that actually ties to lean operations also, which is, so he's a believer in this concept from, it's called, I think Dunbars Number.
Interesting. Tell me more.
And it's named after a British anthropologist, Robin Dunbar. And the principle or the concept basically says there's a limit to the number of people within that any person or any group can have and still maintain healthy relationships with, from a cognitive level, personal, social. And so that drove the excellence in the customer or the user side early on and as they grew. But it also was part of the reason why they capped at 50, because they were like, we don't want to be big. We want to keep the relationships because that will impact the product and that will just impact our lives in general. If we don't,
The culture.
yeah, if we don't have healthy working relationships. So,
Man, that's powerful. I mean, I can attest to that, right? Because I was a part of an organization where I joined when there was maybe less than 30. And when I left, we were 600. And so, yeah, you think about the early days in that company and how tight everybody was. And then as it grew, how the culture started to diminish.
Yeah.
50 to 100, 100 to 200, 200 to 300, 300, 400, 400, 500. Acquire a couple companies, new people, new bodies.
Yeah.
Their values alignment maybe is not exactly the same. Before you know it, there'd be people walking to the office who I'd never even talked to. And I was responsible for doing a lot of the recruiting and the hiring. But in order for that to scale, I had to like remove myself as the cog in the wheel doing everything, right? So, yeah, interesting.
yeah, very much.
Culture within these organizations is generally the thing that helps them be sustainable long term. Okay, and then number 7, and I already alluded to this, but the most powerful thing as an entrepreneur is knowing when it's time to step down and pursue your purpose. And Newark, Craig knew that philanthropy was like his real heart, and this was just kind of a means to that end.
Mm-hmm. You know, that's an interesting point, and I think it needs to be said to all of you guys out there, you know, the sexification of entrepreneurship the last 12, 15 years has made everyone think that they have to be the guy.
Yep.
Right? But it's interesting that you can be the founder of something, step out and get someone in there who's going to take this business to where you dream it can go, but you might not be
You might not be that guy.
You might not be the guy to get it there. And there's numerous examples. And in particular, we've talked about Andrew Wilkerson. Yep. He's one of those guys where he has partners, but as they even, bring these owners and do these different things, they're not afraid to not be the guys and just say, hey, you go run with this. This is the thing.
They hire great CEOs. They remove the initial founder because they don't want to run the company themselves that they're buying.
Right.
And that has allowed them to scale exponentially. So
check your ego at the door.
Yeah, it is. And truthfully, there's some people that are entrepreneurs in the sense that they're great idea, visionary type people, but they really suck at the execution. So if you can't build that team or find that person, then your business is going to struggle long term. And options are a good thing. Like ultimately, you're trying to build an asset. So can you sell the business? Can you hire a president or a CEO and cash flow it in perpetuity? Can you franchise it? Can you merge? You want options, but a lot of people wait until they're tired or burnt out to think about selling their business.
Yeah, and everyone wants the credit,
right?
Versus the actual success, the outcome.
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, like it's not like we're seeing Craig at Hollywood events,
right?
Or driving Lamborghinis, and he's like Elon Musk level wealthy, but the dude is incredibly wealthy.
Yeah, 1.4 billion. Okay.
Yeah. How much do you think he still owns of that business? Do you know?
He owns like 42.8%. Yeah.
Yeah, he's doing all right.
He's doing okay. So
sweet. Well, I think, per usual, great lessons.
Absolutely.
Patience is a big piece of that. Focus on building a great quality product. Focus on finding your tribe. Stay lean. Pretend like the next dollar is not going to come in. And if you do that consistently over time, it's almost unreasonable for you to not be successful.
Start and remain simple.
You got it. Until next time, guys. Peace out.